and a shout out to all of our listeners. Welcome to today's episode of Franchise Friday. My name is Melissa Pang. I am the member relationship strategist here at The Entrepreneur Source, and I have the joy of being with Sarah Van Aken here today. She's the VP of Franchise Development over at BrandONE. And a little bit about BrandONE before I let Sarah introduce herself to all of you lovely people. But BrandONE provides accelerated growth for emerging franchise brands by matching them with high quality candidates. And then they also cultivate relationships across the franchise industry. So it's not just stopping at the bringing great candidates to their emerging brands, but they're really providing their brands access to the expertise that's needed for those brands to refine their operations and infrastructure as they grow. So BrandONE has several brands working with the Entrepreneur Source. So we love the team there, the brands that we have the chance to work with. But with all that being said, I want to say, Sarah, welcome to the Franchise Friday podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. You know how much I love working with you and all my coach friends over at TES. So always a pleasure.
I can't wait to dive into all the good things that we get to talk about today. Sarah, you have a varied background. I was doing a little research and I was like, oh my gosh, what hasn't this woman done? So we want to know more about some of that. I will say, in all the different roles and companies where you've been, there seem to be a few common threads, which I'd love to hear more from you about. But it seems like brand culture is really strong for you, and also people, which are great. But I'll let you tell us more, just a bit about your background and some of the milestones that led up to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So, I guess primarily I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career. So I've started, grown, and exited a couple of businesses in my 20s, in knowing nothing really. I learned a lot the wrong way first before I started doing it the right way. So I'll preface it with that. I started a real estate brokerage, so specialized in first-time home buyers, selling them houses. I leveraged that into a fashion business, which was sort of my passion and dream. So I had several clothing brands. I had a garment factory, first in Bangladesh and then in Philadelphia, a retail store. We wholesaled in a couple hundred other stores in the country. And I did a lot of custom uniforms for celebrity chef restaurants. So that was pretty fun. And then, I know I got to go to a lot of good restaurant openings. I exited that business in 2013 and then went in-house as the president of a design firm where our core business was greeting cards. We sold 125,000 greeting cards every day. And the owner was really semi-absentee at that point. And I was there to do a turnaround, grow the company, and get it sold for her. And did that, got the company, spent about 4.5 years there, and did a lot of things in helping the company grow, including starting a social network.
That's it. Don't worry, not a big deal.
We have like a Facebook do-over. We started the Joy Network. And so we got the company sold to American Greetings a few years ago. But in that process, and I think one of the really key milestones, in my early career, I get bored, right? So I like to do a lot of different things, and was kind of finding my way and transition from maybe doing things out of ego, like starting a fashion business, to getting more in alignment with who I am. But in that role at Kathy Davis Studios, the greeting card company, I realized that I not only liked helping brands grow, which basically I've been doing my whole career, but I really liked helping people through transitions. And, I had become kind of, when I knew that transition was happening over that last year, I started a 2-year coaching and cultural leadership program and became a certified exit planning advisor as well. So I am a coach. I understand a lot of what the coaches do on their side. So I kind of have been in their shoes. But interestingly enough, helping this business owner through her transition and exiting her business and being able to retire is not all that different than helping people invest in a business and buy a franchise, right? And I'm pretty good at supporting people through those big transitions. So, I actually I hadn't been in franchising before this, but I've known Peter Barkman, who's one of the managing partners at BrandONE, for a number of years. Yep. And I know, talk about team and culture. I landed in a great spot. And they were, at the time, this was many years ago at this point, we're just starting BrandONE. And at first I was like, franchising? I don't like to follow rules. I can't be in franchising. I'm terrible at following rules. But he was like, I was taking time off after I got that company sold playing tennis, like as if it was my job. He's like, well, you're not doing anything. Come to a Canine Resorts Discovery Day. And so I did that. I love the brand. I was like, well, this can be fun to do for a while. And I thought that I would just do it part-time for a little while till I figured out what I wanted to do. And here we are 3.5 years later. And, it's really a lot of fun getting to work with the brands that we work with. I personally work with Seniors Helping Seniors and the Dog Wizard that are both in the Entrepreneur Source inventory, and which are exceptional brands in each their own way. I get all the feel good ones, the ones that have the big emotional job are really my specialty. Those I tend to like. I have to really have a value alignment, with the brand, as I think most anyone does or should, at least, in doing this work. But we get to really help some pretty unique brands grow. The Junk Luggers, for instance, I only worked on that a tiny bit, but Michael Mudd and the rest of the team really helped that brand escalate to a way that they had a successful exit and change the founder's life. Like, I mean, that's pretty amazing to be able to support both the brand and think about all the successful people who became entrepreneurs, who kind of took control of their own life, and what that means. I mean, the coaches know, just like we do, all these folks in corporate America who are scared of losing their jobs and they're tired of being downsized, and they want to do something that has value and meaning, and we get to help them get there. And it's not always an easy road, right? There's a lot of emotions that come up when people are entering into a franchise. Yes. So that's sort of the long and the short of it, how I got here.
Well, I just, again, when you look at the common themes of realizing that you like helping people make that like transition, and helping them find that kind of next thing, whether it's a founder looking to get, move on to the next step of life, get out of that business, or like you said, like candidates who are transitioning from corporate America or whatever they're doing currently into business ownership through franchising. I also love that you've kind of walked in their shoes in a few different ways, from the entrepreneur level, making the mistakes, learning, reinventing, and then also looking at franchising and being like, why? No, this isn't something I ever would have thought of. So when you approach your candidates or your brands, your founders, how do you kind of weave that, or do you, and how do you weave that into your conversations, into your everyday?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think fundamentally BrandONE as across the board, and our sort of ethos is really about education, right? We are in candidate recruitment. We want to bring in higher caliber franchise candidates into systems because it's the rising tide that lifts all ships, right? And it's not going to be right for every person, right? So we're not afraid to say no if we don't feel like it's the right fit, which I think people appreciate that, right? If we can do that. And we also educate them. It's not, listen, we're going to get the brand to where it needs to be. It's not about doing deals for us, right? Which I think is something shared that we have with the Entrepreneur Source, right? In terms of it's got to be the right fit for the candidate and a thoughtful education process. And then me personally, I think because I've been a coach for so long at this point, I think I ask questions that are really thought-provoking to people, like about what this place is in life and what makes them nervous. Like I ask people that on a call and they're like, cause I asked the question that they were like, maybe avoiding themselves. Right. And you find out a lot of great information. It's funny how they'll tell their coach something different than they'll tell me, and they'll tell me something different. Like between the two of us, we kind of get the full picture, right? And then it's really about listening. And then as we get through, the process, it's more about watching behavior and feeling it out than it is listening to what they say, right? So are they engaging in the process, in the steps? Are they attending the calls? Are they on time? Are they prepared with questions? And if they're not, try to suss out why they're not, right? Is it not the right fit? Is it, are they not asking me something that's kind of bothering them about it? Is there a way that we can kind of support them through that? And it's much more nuanced than that, really, but it's I like to think of it, I don't know if you're familiar with the term holding space. I might be
A
bringing
little bit.
I'm a yoga
Bring it.
teacher too. I should probably
I
keep
love
that
it.
there,
No, share with us.
yeah. So, when we teach yoga, for instance, we're holding the energy and space of the room, of the group, right? To get 30 people in a
Mhm.
class through a sequence of physical
Yeah.
asana and have the experience of practicing yoga, you have to hold the energy in the space. You have to care for them and ensure that they're getting safely from one position to the next. And so I kind of look at when I'm with candidates, I try to do the same thing, right? I just hold space and make a container for them to, even if it's, I don't want them to have to worry about it's not something I'm going to want to hear. Like if this isn't right for you, you don't have to worry about hurting my
Yep.
feelings, right? Tell me tell me what's not working. If it's not working, awesome. It's so good to know what you don't
Yep.
want, right? It'll help you find out what you do. So I think that that's a big part of it, is that I tend to really hold space for them to be able to explore and not have to worry that I'm trying to sell them something, which I'm not, you know?
I believe that makes all the difference. And if we're on the yoga train, which I am working very hard to get onto, but I just, my weightlifting, there's no time for the yoga, so I need to work
Well,
on
I don't
that.
know. Maybe at the conference. Maybe at the conference this year we
All
should
right,
talk
all
about
right.
it.
You could persuade me, because it is something I know. But in that vein of keeping it like zen for the candidate, because I think sometimes you're talking about, basically humanizing franchising, humanizing the franchise development process, which sometimes
Yeah.
can seem very cookie cutter, or oh my gosh, like I
Mhm.
have goals, I have numbers to hit, and as the franchise developer or as the franchisor, depending on where you are in growth and who's doing the development, but I have all these goals, I need to get to this place, and I have a checklist, I have steps, and
Yeah.
that candidate needs to go through those steps, and it creates a bit of a chaotic feel, I think, sometimes for the
Mm.
candidate, because it's really about what the brand is wanting, what that franchise developer is wanting, and doesn't take into account
Yeah.
the candidate. And you talking about kind of holding space, like, let's meet you where you're
Yep.
at. If right now isn't the time, that's fine. I'm coaching, I'm educating, and it completely almost
Yeah.
shifts that, the feel of the conversations and the feel of that process journey
Yeah.
for the client, which I believe makes all the difference.
Yeah, I think so too. And so there is an importance of discipline in a
Yes.
way, right? So having the process is
Yep.
important because that's an element of them being held. But it's about really in addition to their checklist and things that the things that the candidate needs, right? It's understanding what their sensibilities are. Because one person could be really focused like on territories, like and
Yeah.
understand, that, or one person could be really scared about like how many employees, or one person might be scared about liability, or I mean, there's any range of things based on their previous experience in life that are going to be incredibly important. So how do you get that answered? And not just by me saying it, but who do I have them talk to?
Yeah.
What piece of information can I give them that's not just hearing it from me and only me, so they can validate against it, so that they can solve for that challenge for them,
Agreed.
right?
And like you said, it's so nuanced. Like every
Yeah.
client is so different. So being able to get that, from the client. And like
Yeah.
you said, it's not only just listening, what are they saying to me, but it's their behaviors and what they aren't
Yeah.
saying and how they're showing up to you versus someone else on your team versus a coach if there's someone involved.
Yep. Because sometimes they don't know, right? Like that there's something that's bothering
Yes.
them. They think they're here, but it's actually, so it's kind of about asking the right questions to kind of get them there.
So going from there, what is, we talked a little bit about client experience. We can talk more about that because I think that is probably one of the main components that makes or breaks that franchise development, in a way. If the client has a bad experience, they're never going to learn enough about your brand. They're not going to get far enough along because they
Right.
dismiss it, based on the experience they're having. When it comes to collaboration, which we think is, there's kind of those two pieces: client experience in one hand, collaboration with the coach in the
Mhm.
other. what's the importance of the collaboration to you? And this is a big reason why I think with Seniors Helping Seniors, the Dog Wizard, BrandONE in general, we do align so much on like the coaching, the
Yeah.
education, the
Mhm.
collaboration. But from your perspective and how you do it specifically, what's collaboration look
Sure.
like?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Across the board, you're going to get
Yeah.
this type of collaboration from anyone at BrandONE. But, you know, I specifically, so I take copious notes. And in fact, what I do is I just make all of my initial intro call notes in
Yep.
an email. So
There
the
you
coach
go.
gets the whole shebang. Like, I'm like, you get to learn everything that I learned. And I also do that for my own because because I can't tell you the number of times I've gone back post discovery day when they're preparing for an
Yeah.
executive interview and said, Joe, this is remember why you are here, right? You want to tell them about your why. You are here because you don't want to do the same thing every day, because you want, this kind of freedom. You like this brand because of your experience with your mom and da da da. I was like, these are the things to talk about, right? Those things help me down the line all the time. And also, like I said before, sometimes
Yeah.
they'll tell me something that they didn't tell the coach, and that's really helpful. The first call or so, I'm probably only going to email because, they're still early. But once we really get past the main calls, if they're engaged and they're like we can tell they're kind of the energy is moving forward, then it kind of moves to phone call. Like I'm
Yeah.
basically talking to coaches all the
Speed
time.
dial. Yeah.
But there are times too that if I see something, if they have like a little bit of a concern and I've addressed it and they're hearing it, but I think that they're saying it's one thing, but it
Mhm.
might be something else, I'll say to the coach I'm working with, hey, can you help me out on this? Like they're worried about this. This is the actuality of it. I can't do anything more here because they're going to feel like I'm selling them, and that's not what this is. So how can you come in and support and help them understand this piece?
And what would you say to people? So I love all that, and thank you for sharing like specifics, because I think sometimes we collaboration is such a buzzword. It's like collaborate, and you're like, what does that mean really, like in
Yeah.
practice? So I think that's so helpful. But what would you say to whether it's a franchise developer or maybe it's a coach? People working with these clients, and you're working with a lot of candidates. You have a lot coming in.
Mhm.
What do you say to people who would say, I just don't have time for that? Like I know I want to, but I just don't have the time.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say I don't know that you have the time not
Yeah.
to. You're probably wasting more of your life force in having candidates not complete the process than you are by maybe work with
Yeah.
less candidates and do it more efficiently because you'll have a higher rate of placement um, by doing it. It exponentially change because there's times I'm like, okay, they're at this point. I now need them to talk about financing. I'm sure you probably want to do that with them. Now's the
Yeah.
time, right? These are the things. Like, so I'm probably more proactive than a lot of people
Which
on
shows,
this side,
in the results. Yeah.
yeah, but I think that especially in with the coach mentality and the ethos that you guys have, I think that and I don't see that all that often, right? I don't with the I did a lot of
Yeah.
placements with TS coaches last year, and I don't think that I had that issue at all with the folks that I place with. So, I don't know, but I can imagine that there's definitely people in my role in other places outside of BrandONE that might be in that
Yeah. No,
boat.
I think it's just, and it is something that I hear, again, from, within the franchising world, franchise development, because it does seem like, oh my gosh, I just have to get through this. I have so many.
Yeah,
And taking the time to
yeah,
slow down and say, okay, let's look at quality and how am I helping the people that I have in front of me? And maybe fewer is better,
hmm,
because in the long run, it's going to be better for them and for the brand.
yeah,
You're not just turning and burning.
right,
Um,
exactly.
Switching to the brand, like overall brand from a more franchisor level, what in your experience, and we can talk about the current brands that you work with BrandONE, what does it take for a brand to be successful? Like, what have you seen? What are there
Yeah.
shifts that you've seen the brands have to make, where they
Mhm.
started, where they are now, to really get them to that level of success, whatever it looks like, but basically franchise growth,
Yeah,
you know?
right. Right. So, I mean, successful franchises are a lot of franchise partners doing very,
Yes.
very well, right?
Yes.
And the franchise partners have to make money. That's like kind of the foundation. And this is, individual entrepreneurs. And sometimes that's a little hard because it's, all individual people. But, we look really at three things when we decide to partner with a brand, right? Are they in a market that has been growing and showing signs of growth? And do they have a great market position in it? So the Dog Wizard, for instance, if you go onto any single franchise partner's website and look at their or Google and look at their customer reviews, are out of this world, right? We look at great unit economics that are easily replicable by franchise partners. So do they have, and that means, are there great numbers, and are the franchise partners supported from an operational perspective in achieving those, right? And I think, like Seniors Helping Seniors, one of the things they did, because they've been around 20 years, but they spent 5 years innovating and incubating a new business model, right? And one of the key things that they implemented, because franchise partners, it was sort of more of organic growth in building referral partners in the community, but they brought in marketing infrastructure that really helped them go heavy into digital at first to help their franchise partners scale more quickly. So we're seeing a lot of that. Right. And then we look for a team. Do they have the experience and the vision? Are they growing that team in advance of the system needing it? And, the Dog Wizard, in the last 3 years, I mean, I think their team grew from a handful to like 15 or 20 in advance of their system growth. They spent 2 years not growing, developing out the Dog Wizard Training Academy so that they would be prepared for the growth that was coming, right? So are they building out that system in advance of the system needing it? And then really culture, right? What is their relationship with their franchise partners? And, like I called 50 Seniors Helping Seniors franchise partners before we launched them myself, who all like gushed about the brand, right? And the same way with the Dog Wizard, I had the funniest conversation the other day. A guy who is married to someone who works at corporate at the Dog Wizard went to the annual conference a couple months ago. And when they were there, like she works in the accounting office. When they were there, he's like, "Oh my God, this is the most amazing culture. I want to do this." So he called me, and he just couldn't stop gushing about like the incredible culture between all the franchise partners. And that's actually what I hear consistently from every candidate we place, is that every person they talked to at the Dog Wizard, whether it was franchise partner or at the corporate office, was generous and kind and engaging and passionate about what they were doing. And that's a big part of it.
It is. I mean, again, I think sometimes we maybe forget a little bit that these people are going to invest often their life savings or a lot of money into a brand that they are going to be with for 10 or more years. So it's a big deal to make sure that all the parts are there. And I like the way you broke it down in terms of like, what's the industry look like, innovation, the culture, and then team. And if you can really excel in those areas, then that's a recipe there's a lot of opportunity there for a brand that's like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the focus on ensuring that their franchise doing what it takes to get their franchise partners everything that they need to be successful and continuing to refine and improve.
Yeah. And I think too, sometimes we do focus a lot on the unit economics and the numbers and things, which are of course important. You want to go into a business that's going to get someone the return on investment that they're looking for, but it's all these other maybe even a little more like subjective as opposed to the objective. But when you talk about like team and culture, people don't have that oftentimes in a corporate job. They're missing those pieces. So focus on those things, because that might be the difference from them like moving forward or not moving forward. At their corporate job, they might be making a great income. They see that, but they don't feel a great camaraderie with their team. They're not gushing about, leadership or whatever. So how can you as a brand really bring that forward and talk about those things? I feel like I do see more and more brands focusing on that, which is awesome, because I think
Here's the other thing about culture that's important too, is that, so one of the things I love about franchising is, none of my businesses were franchises, right? I just told you everything I learned, I basically learned by doing it the wrong way first, right? I invested in businesses and I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So I love franchising because a lot of people have made those mistakes before you, right? And you get a lot of support. entrepreneurship was a very lonely place for me, but in a franchise, you're not alone, right? You're a business for yourself, but not by yourself. But that doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect, right? And you might have a hiccup, like, I don't know, something might happen and you might need a little extra time, or, who knows what could happen. But I think, and I heard this, I was speaking at a sustainability conference almost 10 years ago, and the keynote speaker at that conference, he like ran a credit union in Vancouver, and they were shifting their investments to invest in local entrepreneurs instead of real estate. And so he was explaining how to teach his loan officers how to invest in people, in their big ideas, right? And he's like, you need to be able to sit across from someone and decide and really figure out whether they are somebody that you can go through something hard with, right? Because if there are bumps in the road, are these people that you like, trust, and respect, that will be with you along the way, that you can communicate with?
I
And it still sticks with me.
love that.
That still sticks with me.
Yes. Like, again, just taking it from surface level into like, let's look at this a little bit closer. Like when we sit across from each other, right? And that's true too. It's not all just rosy optimism of, yay, I'm a business owner, I'm with a franchise, and now life is just,
Yep.
wow,
Life is
I'm good to
perfect.
go.
It's still work, right? We can't tell people it's still going to be work getting the business started. But this is what I learned from Peter Barkman, when he always asks people, do your head and your heart align? And that's like become a theme at BrandONE, right? Because it's true. It's like, does this align from both?
And again, I feel like that really does put the humanity into franchising, which can be such a great opportunity. But for that person and where they're at right now, do their head and their heart align? And it's okay if it doesn't right now, there's always, and I hear countless stories from coaches or whatever, where, someone fell off the face of the earth, or they just put it on hold because for whatever, like, life still is happening as we're going through these, through the experience, through the journey of discovery on franchising. And they come back, maybe it's 6 months later, maybe it's 3 years later, but because again, it all goes back to the experience they had. They're like, okay, now I'm ready. I still really hate my job or whatever it is. And and I connect, like, my heart was in it, but my head wasn't. But now my head and my heart are ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be right for people. I know, sometimes I feel, sometimes I get a little pressure from folks about, like, they want this person to move forward. I'm like, I don't, like, they've got this going on in their life. Like, they're going through divorce, they're this, or I'm like, we should probably slow down. Maybe it's not the best time for them making a decision, because I'm not afraid to say, hey, are you sure?
Like, let's be 100%, or at least as close to 100% as we can be, on that. And again, I think that, again, going back to what you said about coaching and asking the right questions, asking the questions that they maybe are avoiding asking themselves, that's a really big deal.
Yeah. Well, I think especially too, when it comes to fear, which everyone, that little voice, the inner critic of fear in you, as you get closer to making the choice and you do feel your head and heart in line, is going to get really loud, right? Really, really loud in there, because it knows it's like decision time. And really, like, that's when I think it's even more important to kind of be like, okay, well, what is it, and just really name it and recognize it, right? And that it's natural. A natural part of what happens for folks.
No, love that. Again, this is why we just align so well. So when it comes to, and we talk a lot about this at the Entrepreneur Source, but the future of franchising. So the space that we're in, the industry, what do you see on the horizon? Or what do you see, whether it's like trends in a certain way, or the way that franchising is going to go? And it can be for BrandONE, your specific brands, franchising in general. What is that kind of future? What do you envision?
I don't know if I'm an expert in franchising enough to be able to answer that question, but there are some pretty cool things that I've seen. Or maybe this is like a little bit of dream world, but I'm really curious about the way that AI is going to interface with how we engage candidates to give them a more in real life experience through discovery. especially when it's places that have brick or mortar, or if it's a service business, like how can we, and this is like me making this up, but how can we help people understand what a day in the life of a franchise partner is through some tools like that as it becomes more accessible and isn't so crazy, expensive to do it. But that's super interesting to me. Certainly there's all sorts of new experiential brands that are popping up, and I'm curious to see, there's like the restaurants that are also pulling all these like darts and all those different things. Like, I'm just really curious to
Yeah.
CBD, other things like that. I'm just really curious in how culture evolves, how some of those things will play, and whether they'll be fads or whether they're going to be major cultural shifts, which I think will be interesting. So I don't know that I have any predictions, but those are certainly things that I'm
That's
curious
okay.
about.
If we all had a crystal ball, life would be great. But I really like that too, and especially looking at the actual generations coming up, because even still, I
Mhm.
see, with clients that they're getting to be a younger age, and I feel like
Yeah,
that too is, of course, it's going to affect it, but to your point, affect maybe the brands that are going, the next wildly
right.
successful brand, depending on the generations coming up, just how people are funding and investing their money and doing all these different things. Like, what is
Yep.
that going to look like?
Yeah, I think that is going to be really curious. I am really curious about that as well, because I think that younger generations feel a lot more
Yes.
empowered
Yeah.
to to really have the right life experience in a
Mhm.
way that I feel like maybe my generation was like, we have to work, we have to, like this, and we're kind of the victims of this work machine. And I think that I am seeing younger folks who are just like, no, not don't want to do it that way. But I am interested in what they're going to relate to. But I placed in Seniors Helping Seniors, I placed a 28-year-old former attorney who spent like 5 years in corporate law and felt like he was getting his soul sucked, and he became a Seniors Helping Seniors franchise partner. He's doing
I love
great.
that. Yes.
Um,
Right. And let me
you
ask
know,
you this. I mean, I just want to go down this track for a minute. Like, what was it about seniors helping seniors for him?
So he was really close with his
Okay. Yeah.
grandparents and saw, and helped his folks in helping navigate some of their challenges. And they wanted to stay at home, but they were all kind of juggling the care, and it was really stressful. And he was really close with them, and it just struck him the need and this desire to give back. So I think a lot of young people are really connected to that desire, that mission
Mhm.
driven life. And not to make broad strokes judgments about them, but
Yeah.
they're willing to take the risk and explore unique ways of doing that because they are more empowered to do it. Um, you know, I think also gets harder, when you're in this sort of 40s, 50s age range, the stakes get higher. Like, I wouldn't today
Yeah.
in my 40s go out and open a garment factory in Bangladesh when I had no idea what I was
Right.
doing,
We need to
right?
circle
The,
back
the
to
things
that. But
that I
yeah.
would only be crazy enough to do when I was young. So even I'm more risk averse, and I'm pretty,
Yeah.
for all things considered, make a lot of leaps. But
Yeah.
I think that they just see more possibility. They're not in the same
Yeah.
tracks, right? We were like, be lawyers, be doctors,
Yes.
do this, have this career, have, you know, s- those sorts of things. And those rules have changed. So it will be interesting. I
Yep.
agree.
And not only will it maybe shift on some of the industries that are really, but to your point, going into brands that are in industries that are very well established and kind of changing the brand culture even, and different things about a very well established, in the senior care, senior health um, space, or some of these different industries that have been around for so long, but innovations and just the way that they look at things, and to your point, very mission
Yeah.
driven. I feel like that is
Yep.
accurate.
Yeah. Things that really have strong customer
Yes.
experiences, have great culture, bring a lot of
Yep.
value. And, that can be across a lot of different industries. I don't think it's like, I think it can be industry
Agreed.
agnostic, but those elements of it.
10 out of 10. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up here, even though we could continue talking for hours.
For a
A
long,
long
long
time.
time.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's not a problem that you and I have.
Talking is not a weakness. But thank you again so much. So, okay, what's a book or a podcast that you would recommend? Doesn't have to be recent. Can be.
Oh, like a
No,
business
can be
book
anything.
or well, I'll tell you what my favorite book in the whole world is, and it's actually a novel. It's called The Overstory.
Okay. All right.
Which is an amazing piece of literature.
All right. Well,
so I'll leave you with I'm not even going to give you a business book because I stopped reading those a long
I'm
time
living
ago.
it. I'm living the business book. Okay. No, I love that. I thought I had more questions, but that's it. That's it. You're going to recommend a book, The Overstory, to the audience. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on Franchise Friday. This was fabulous.
Yeah, so much fun. So great to see you. And hello to all my coach friends.
Thank you so much. Have a fabulous day, everyone.